Good morning, dear friends and dear colleagues. Welcome to CAS Scholars Lecture Series. Today we are very lucky to have a very famous professor and also my former colleague, Professor Jiang Shixue. He was the Deputy Director General of the Institute of European Studies for almost 10 years, or more than 10 years, I think. And he was a very good colleague of me. And now he is a distinguished professor at Shanghai University, especially dealing with regional and country studies. And he has a lot of titles. For example, President of Latin American Studies, Chinese Society, and had a lot of publications, books and papers. So I would not, because it will take too much time for list all of the publication. I think I would prefer to leave the time for his speech. Recently, he had a long time research on the Chinese diplomacy, and especially on today's topic. So, how to understand Chinese China's major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. I think today is a very important topic, and let us welcome Professor Jiang for his lecture. Professor Jiang, the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chen. Friends from Hungary and other countries around the world. So let me share my PPT for you. Okay. So you can see it now.
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm going to talk about China's major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. So now you can see the second slide, right? Can you see my? Yeah.
Yes.
You know, if there are any problems for this. For my PPT, just tell me, okay? Let me check if it's okay. Times are changing, the world is changing, so every country's diplomacy is changing. China's diplomacy is also changing. Now, the topic of my presentation is about the so-called Chinese major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. As far as I can understand, this terminology was first put forward by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in his speech at the launching of the second World Peace Forum 9 years ago. Wang Yi said, it can be said that on the basis of inheriting the general policy and the fine tradition of the new China's diplomacy for the past 60+ years, contemporary China is actively exploring a path of major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. Let's say it's called MCDCC. Okay. Now then, 1 year later, Xi Jinping said at the Central Foreign Affairs Work Conference, as China has entered a critical stage of realizing the greater rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, it must construct the major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. Now, in China, some people say it's called a major power diplomacy with Chinese characteristics, but the official official language it's called a major country, not a major power, because China believes it is still a normal country, not a power yet. Now, what is the Chinese characteristics? Okay, and let me quote Xi Jinping's definition in his speech at the College of Europe, Bruges, Belgium. He was in Belgium in April 2014. In his speech, he put forward his definition of the Chinese characteristics. China is a country with long history of civilization. China is a country that has suffered so much in the past. China is still a country that has adopted socialism with Chinese characteristics, and China is the largest developing country in the world. China is a country undergoing profound transformation. So these are the 5 points for the definition given by President Xi Jinping. Now, please note this definition. Okay, let me say the largest developing country in the world. So China is now the second biggest economy in the world, but still China believes it is a developing country, not a developed country. Okay, so this is very important. Well, what is the meaning of major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics? Well, different understandings. If you ask, different Chinese scholars, they will give you some kind of different understandings of this kind of definition. Now, my understanding goes as follows. First, it simply means 2 aims. According to the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, in October 2017, the major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics aims to foster a new type of international relations and build a community with a shared future for mankind. Okay, so these are the 2 aims. Now, what is the so-called new type of international relations? It features mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation. So that's the new type of international relations. And what is the meaning of a community with a shared future for mankind? It means 5 words. A word of lasting peace, universal security, common prosperity, harmony for all cultures and civilizations, and a clean and beautiful eco-environment. So these are the 5 points for the so-called a community with a shared future for mankind. Now these are the 5 nice phrases. That's the community with shared future for mankind. Now, please pay attention to the translation. When this notion in Chinese we call it 人人民共同体, when it was put forward first in 2013, the translation was different compared with now. At that time, the translation was simply a community of common destiny for mankind. Now we changed the translation from common destiny to mankind, changed the translation from common destiny for mankind to a community of shared future for mankind. So that's the difference, destiny and a shared future. The second understanding of the major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics is simply diplomacy. You know the word diplomacy. Now let's say it's called a diplomacy, or simply Xi-style diplomacy. This is the cover of a Chinese magazine. Very nice photo. And it comes from this photo. Okay, it was taken at the APEC summit. I think in 2016 or 2017, many years ago. Okay, so that's the also. So you know this person. Everybody knows this person. Okay, so this is the diplomacy, diplomacy or Xi-style diplomacy. Xinhua is the name of the China's main news agency, the most important news agency in China. So Xinhua published an article from A to Z of China's diplomacy and Xi's leadership. Xi-style means China's relations with the outside world have started new chapters. Some foreign media outlets believe that China's diplomatic stance sends a signal. Xi-style diplomacy has taken shape, or diplomacy has taken shape. So that's the second the definition. Now, when we say diplomacy or Xi-style diplomacy, of course, we must mention President Xi Jinping. Let me quote a paragraph from the New Yorker, an article published 7 years ago. As a teenager, Xi Jinping had been sent to work on a farm. He was so delicate that other laborers rated him as 6 on a 10-point scale, not even as high as the women, he said later, with some embarrassment. Now at 61, because this article was written 7 years ago, he was 5'11", taller than any Chinese leader in nearly 4 decades, with a rich baritone and a confident heft. When he received a guest, he stood still, long arms slack, hair pompaded, a portrait of take it or leave it composure that induced his visitor to cross the room in pursuit of a handshake. So that's the second definition. That was Xi working in the countryside. And let me tell you that I personally, I also worked in the countryside for 2.5 years. Much shorter than President Xi Jinping. Now, the third definition of major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics is simply put, keep a low profile and do something, moving from, or I would say, China is going to move from keeping a low profile to doing something and striving to do more. Deng Xiaoping said in the early 1990s, 30 years ago, Deng Xiaoping said China should keep a low profile. At the same time, China should do something. And now China wants to strive to do more. So from this keeping a low profile to striving to do more simply means the major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. Okay, so these are the 3 understanding, and based on what I said just now. So this is my definition. It's a long definition. Let's have a discussion. So let's go into discuss whether my definition is correct or not. so Professor Chen and my friends all over the world. So major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics, also known as Xi-style diplomacy or diplomacy, based on the reality of China's national conditions today, is the conduct of China's relations with foreign countries with behaviors moving from keep a low profile and do something to strive to do more for the purpose of constructing a new type of international relations and a community of shared future for mankind. It took me quite a long to figure out this definition. I think this definition, I hope that my definition can be adopted by the Xinhua News Agency, so that I can make some kind of contributions to China's academic research on this major country diplomacy. But of course, we need to discuss whether this definition is correct or not. Okay, so now, what has been achieved? This is a very important question. Well, because of time, I can only summarize the achievements of China's diplomacy in the following points. China has become more active and important on the world stage by undertaking more global responsibility. China has expressed a strong opposition to hegemonism, bullyism, unilateralism, and protectionism. Okay, so I believe I can summarize these 4 isms into the current dangers the world is facing now. China has put forward the Global Development Initiative and also Global Security Initiative. These 2 initiatives are very important for the world, and that's the contribution from China. China has made a great contribution to the world economy by developing its own economy and opening to the outside world. China has become the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operations. China has offered many kinds of development aid to other developing countries. So these are just a few points. How many? 3. Because of time, let me summarize these 6 points as the achievements of China's diplomacy in the past 10 years or so. And particularly for our colleagues in Europe, in Central Europe, you know this trend, you know this China Rail Express service. And well, this cartoon, I like this cartoon very much. Look at the 2 persons. They are the leaders of the 2 great countries. One leader is building a wall on the US-Mexico border. Okay, then another leader is trying to push forward economic relationship between China and Latin America. Look at this cart, and he's going to buy something from Latin America, and well, lots of money falling out of the pocket. It's okay. So if you compare these 2 countries, if you compare these two leaders, you can understand the difference. Okay, so who is making contributions to the mankind? And also China has opened its door to the outside world, and this expo takes place every year, every November in Shanghai. Last time I went there, and I saw many business companies and many countries from East and Central Europe, and I believe that this kind of expo has benefited the bilateral economic relationship between China and Central and Eastern European countries. Okay. Now, apart from these achievements, well, we are going to discuss the following issues, or we can say in the process of implementing China's diplomacy, we have to deal with the following issues. And some issues are external and some others are internal. Now, the first external issue would be something like how to break off the US-led containment against China. The containment covers all areas ranging from trade to technology. And you know this is Huawei. So the US is very angry over the technological development produced by Huawei. And also in terms of military aspects, the US also wants to intervene in the so-called Pacific Indo area. So from all kinds of things. So that's a kind of a US-led containment against China. So China needs to figure out clever ways of dealing with this kind of containment. Now, the question we must answer is, will this containment succeed? Will this containment succeed by the US and its friends in Europe? Well, I would say the containment will definitely slow down the realization of Chinese people, people's dream of a better life. But it will also spur the Chinese people to work harder in this way, so that we can bypass this kind of containment. Okay, so look at this kind of well, how would you say, the AUKUS and the G4 group, India, the US, Japan, and Australia. Now, another question we must answer is, will this kind of anti-China alliance succeed? I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure. I believe these two persons may know whether or not this kind of anti-China alliance will succeed. And personally, as a Chinese scholar, I will say it will definitely fail. It will not succeed. Martin Wolf, who is quite famous, he published an article in the Financial Times not long ago. He said, containing China is not a feasible option. The relationship of the US with China is not like that with the Soviet Union. Yes, there will be much competition, but there must also be deep cooperation. So I personally, I totally agree with Martin Wolf's comments. So that means this kind of anti-China alliance between the US and the EU will definitely fail. And also we have to look at this comment by Reuters. Decoupling from China would be the wrong way to go, Germany warns. I hope that, well, maybe many people in Germany believe that decoupling from China would be the wrong way. But, well, I watched the TV last night, and some people in Germany believe that Germany is going to keep a long distance from China in terms of economic and, well, diplomatic aspects. So I don't know what will Germany do regarding its relationship with China. Well, in the face of this kind of anti-China alliance, China China has to find a friend, and that's Russia. Okay, so let's look at the comment made by CNN. CNN says US and its European allies are pushing China and Russia closer together. Well, when you are faced with this kind of anti-China alliance, China must move closer to Russia. Well, that's a very logical response. That's a very correct option for China and also for Russia. And if the US-led alliance is going to strengthen its power, and the same will be the link, the relationship between China and Russia. At the same time, China will try its best to win support from other developing countries. So third world support is very important for China. That's very logical, okay? Now, that's the first issue from the external side. Now, the second challenge from the external side has something to do with China-phobia or anti-China sentiment. It's on the rise. It's on the rise over the past, 20, 30 years. Well, I have to point out that in the world, even in Europe, okay, so even in Europe, there are different kinds of people. Those who do not know much about China, do not know much about China. Those who will never put down their tinted lens, they will always see China in a different way, in a very negative way. And those who will always see China as an enemy, okay? So I believe in Europe, in Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, you can find these three kinds of people very easily. You can find these different categories of people. Now, what can China do? What can China do? Well, not an easy job. Not an easy job, particularly when you are faced with these two kinds of people, particularly when you are faced with those who will always see China as the enemy. China really can do nothing at all, because they always want to see China as an enemy. Okay, so in the international relations theory, that has something to do with the so-called constructivism. Okay, so the US always see North Korea as an enemy, although North Korea has no nuclear weapons, but the UK has some or has many nuclear weapons, but the US will never see the UK as an enemy, okay? So that can be explained by the so-called constructivism in the School of International Relations Theories, okay? This cartoon is very interesting. So China is a very lovely panda. So in the eyes of the US, this is the UK and this is Japan. So the lovely panda is a monster, So, okay. So also including, don't forget Australia. So in the eyes of Australia, Japan, the UK and the US, the lovely panda is a devil, is a monster. Only in the eyes of North Korea and Russia, they are real pandas. So can China change the perception of these four countries? Well, I don't know. I want to hear the comments by our dear friends in the audience. It's not an easy job, okay? So when you are talking to this person who always lied, cheated, and stole So can you ask this person to change his perception of China? Can we succeed in asking this person, Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, to change your perception? I doubt it. I don't believe China will succeed to change his perception of China. Okay, so this is a big, very, very important issue. Okay, now the external challenge, third external challenge, is uncertainty has become the norms of today for the outside world. Okay, look, peace is not taken for granted. A new Cold War is emerging. Even last year, I doubt the new Cold War was emerging, but now I believe a new Cold War is already in the making. The ground for the world economy's future is shaking. Ending the COVID-19 pandemic is yet to be seen. So these are the uncertainties for China. Okay, so China is going to realize the so-called China dream, but you have to deal with these kind of external uncertainties. So very important. And also don't forget, hegemonism and unilateralism is also on the rise. Okay, so these are the three very difficult challenges for China. And also we have to deal with some kind of internal challenges. First, how to keep the balance of keeping a low profile and doing some things or striving to do more. This is very, very difficult job for the Chinese leaders. Okay, so on the one hand, we need to keep a low profile, but on the other hand, we need to do something and strive to do more. So this is not an easy job. Okay, now as a rising power, China has been undertaking more global responsibility. So that's the reality. I think every person, everybody, I think our friends in the audience, many people in Europe should understand China has been undertaking more global responsibility in the past 3 or 4 decades. However, China is still a developing country. Okay, China is not a developed country. Okay, China is still quite poor compared with many countries in Europe. Okay, now can the elephant hide itself behind a tree? Well, that's the question. I think even among the Chinese scholars, we will hear different opinions. Even you will hear some people say, well, China is a big elephant, it cannot hide itself, so China should forget about keep a low profile. But I myself would suggest, because China is still a developing country, so China should continue to keep a low profile. At the same time, China should undertake more global responsibility. Okay, so this is the first internal challenge. As I said, different people have different say. Now, the second challenge, how to deal with the Taiwan question. This is a question which has become so important over the past several years. Taiwan has belonged to China since ancient times, 1,800 years. So Taiwan is part of China. Resolving the Taiwan question and realizing China's complete reunification is a shared aspiration of all the sons and daughters of the Chinese nation. Sixth Annie, let me tell you, Xi Jinping said in 2016, he mentioned Sixth Annie at the conference to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Dr. Chen Yishan's birth in November 2016. Sixth Annie, very important very, very important. Try to remember, okay, my friends in the audience, try to remember the 6th Annie. We will never allow anyone, any organization, any political party at any time in any form to separate any piece of Chinese territory, including Taiwan, from China. Okay, so try to remember the 6th Annie. That's the 6th Annie announced by Xi Jinping in 2016. Okay, and now look at this. Last month, just one month ago, August 2022, China published a white paper. It's called the Taiwan Question and China's Reunification in the New Era. Well, you may remember that that's almost 1 week, 1 week after Pelosi's trip to the Chinese province of Taiwan. Okay, so 1 week after her trip. Okay, so I hope the white paper has been translated into English. Okay, so I hope you will find this paper and read it. It's quite long. The white paper says, we will work with the greatest sincerity and exert our utmost efforts to achieve peaceful reunification. But we will not renounce the use of force, and we reserve the option of taking all necessary measures, including military actions. This is to guard against external interference from the US, Europe, Japan, anywhere, and all separatist activities. I believe even you will find some people who wish to interfere China's internal domestic affairs. I mean, even some people, even from Europe. Okay, so we are against these Europeans. So this is from the white paper. The white paper says, in no way does it target our fellow Chinese in Taiwan. Use of force would be the last resort taken under compelling circumstances. We will only be forced to take drastic measures. You know the meaning of drastic measures, okay? To respond to the provocation of separatist elements or external forces should they ever cross our red lines. Okay, so we have our red lines. The external forces, some external forces have tried to exploit Taiwan to contain China. And I'm very, very sorry to say that the external forces come from the US and even some countries in Europe. Okay. Now, look at these different signs. That's the Taipei representative office in the EU. Now, remember the name, Taipei. This is Taipei representative office in the Netherlands, okay, Taipei. But now there is a greater country called Lithuania. Lithuania wants to change the name from Taipei to Taiwan. That's against China's red line, okay? So that's a great interference in China's domestic interference, okay? That's against China's wish. So China is not happy about Lithuania. So the diplomatic status between China and Lithuania has been downgraded, okay? So I hope someday people in Lithuania will change the name, will correct its mistake, okay? So this is very simple. Henry Kissinger says, Washington and Beijing must seek to avoid putting Taiwan at the center of their tense diplomatic relationship. His comments come shortly after President Joe Biden said the US would be prepared to intervene militarily if China invaded the democratic self-governed island. Okay. Now, we do not use this word invade. Okay, so that's the word from Henry Kissinger. Okay. This is from CNBC. Now, so many people, even in Taiwan, many people in the mainland of China and in Taiwan of China are talking about the possibility whether or not the US will intervene militarily in Taiwan. Well, just now we mentioned that Joe Biden said the US will intervene militarily in Taiwan. Well, I hope not. I hope not. If the US does not wish to see more coffins coming back from the Taiwan Strait, well, I hope the US will not intervene militarily in Taiwan. Okay. So this is a very simple reply to Joe Biden's comments. And personally, I don't believe, okay, or even many of my friends who are scholars of international relations or US-China relationship, we do not believe the US will intervene. Look at Afghanistan. Okay. So, well, I do not believe the US dares to intervene militarily. Okay. Henry Kissinger says US-China tensions threaten to engulf the entire world and could lead to an Armageddon-like clash between these two military and technology giants. You know what does this mean, okay? Armageddon-like. That means the end of the world. That's the end of the world. I believe people in Europe do not like this kind of clash, okay? Because that's the end of the world, okay? Now, the third internal challenge for China is how to do our homework in a better way. Well, each country has lots of homework to do, okay? Countries in Eastern and Central Europe should do your own homework, and China should do its own homework. Well, because of time, I can only mention the following. China must continue to reform and open to the outside world in a bold way, maintain the momentum of economic growth, push forward a more rapid social development. Okay, so these 3 points are very important for China. Okay, so if China wants to carry out its diplomacy, it must pay attention to these 3 kinds of internal homework. Okay, so this is my comments or my understanding of China's diplomacy with a major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. So China needs to deal with the 3 external issues and 3 internal issues. Okay, so Director Chen, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiang. You had elaborated the China's major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. So you started with the definition, and then you mentioned the achievements of such kind of diplomacy. And at the end, you also raised several issues or the challenges externally and internally. So thank you very much for your very rich content lecture. So here I would like to go to the second part of this lecture, so Q&A session. And if the audience have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat room, and then we can try to invite Professor Jiang to answer the questions. So maybe not everybody has been prepared, so we're still waiting for the questions.
Can I try to ask a question from Bulgaria?
Okay, please, Vladimir.
My name is Valentin Katranjev. I'm a senior research fellow with the Bulgarian Diplomatic Institute. First of all, I would like to thank the renowned researcher and speaker on presenting the main points of the China's modern diplomacy and the pressures and developments that is affecting the conduct of that diplomacy. My question relates to the current geopolitical dynamics in Europe. To what effect the current war in Ukraine will affect the conduct of the Chinese diplomacy in Europe? Will there be any adjustments to its diplomatic offensive in Europe? As you can understand, this war is definitely trying to remake the world order in a different shape. So how China views the current developments, and what is the diplomatic strategy for China within the context of the current geopolitical changes and systemic changes that are taking place in Europe and around the world? Thank you.
Very, very important and very, very good questions, my friend. Well, first of all, I want to point out that I often read the web articles and the papers by many foreign countries, including the US and the European newspapers and all kinds of things. Well, my impression is that people in the US and in Europe often criticize China for not doing something to stop the war in Ukraine. And also people in Europe say that why China supports this kind of war. Well, let me tell you. First, China's position on this Ukrainian crisis is very clear and very straightforward, okay? And the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi put forward 5 points as China's position towards this kind of a crisis, okay? Well, now remember, 2 of the points, as far as I can understand, 2 of the 5 points are very, very important. One, the sovereignty and the territory of each country must be respected, okay? So my understanding of this point goes like this. Sovereignty and the territory of Ukraine should be respected. Okay, this is the first point. Second point, security of one country must be secured, must be protected without the sacrifice of others. Okay, so Ukraine wants to protect its own security by joining NATO. But at the same time, Ukraine should show some kind of concern for the security of Russia, okay? So let me say, just let me repeat. So when you read the 5 points put forward by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, so you must pay attention to the 2 points I said just now. The 2 points are very important, okay, out of the 5 points. So China does not support any military action against the Ukraine because China wants to protect the sovereignty and the territory of Ukraine. Okay, so this is the first point I want to make. Secondly, you can judge China's actions, okay, by looking at what China has done. Okay, China has been trying its best to stop this kind of a military action. Okay, but however, the US, even the EU, are not doing the same job as China is doing. Okay, what the US and the EU are doing is to pour oil on the fire. Okay, now in Chinese we say, do not put more wood on the fire. Okay, in English you say, do not pour more oil on the fire, or the meaning is the same. Okay, so I hope that well, scholars like you would write something which can suggest to Brussels that do not offer, well, oil or wood to the fire. The EU should stand alongside with China, try your best to stop the war. So let's hope that my dream will come true. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you.
Jiang. Yeah, there is a question about the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. So as you have mentioned in your presentation, can you deliberate a little bit greater details, especially in the relations with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and as well as the Belt Road Initiative?
Okay, now China. Now, if you follow the development of Chinese foreign policy, you will notice that China is very good at putting forward initiatives. And the first or the most important initiative is called the Belt Road Initiative. Okay, now Belt Road Initiative is a real action. Okay, promoting trade and investment. Now, the Global Development Initiative, or let's say GDI for short, and the Global Security Initiative, let's say GSI for short, they are more, well, they are less action, more ideas, more proposals. Okay, so the meaning of GDI and the GSI are something like that China and many other countries, of course, including European countries, should contribute in all kinds of ways and means to push forward development, particularly for the developing world. Okay, so that's, well, if I can summarize the GDI into one sentence. Okay, now for the one sentence which I can summarize the meaning of GSI, it means every country, including China, the EU, should do something to promote security. All kinds of, always say it's a global security for every country in the world. Security for Ukraine, for China, for Russia, and for the EU as well. Okay, so these are the basic meanings of GDI and the GSI. I think you can find more about the meaning of these kind of GDI and GSI in the Chinese webs. There are many English translations and Chinese articles and papers about the GDI and GSI. Now, regarding the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, well, personally, I would say this Shanghai Cooperation Organization should not be seen as a bloc or an anti-West bloc, like two blocks fighting each other on the world stage. No, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SOC is for the purpose of to fight against terrorism and pushing forward regional economic growth. Well, so that's why it's so attractive. That's why it can attract more members. I can read from the media that some more countries are going to join this SOC. So let me repeat, SOC is not against the European Union. It's not against the US. It's not against the West. It's a regional cooperation. It's still quite weak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think there is a following question regarding on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but I think Professor Jiang had already replied to this question. So next, I think there is another question about okay. So it says, what is China? Yeah, it says,
yes, I can see one question. What China will do if the U.S. Congress passes the Taiwan Policy Act? Can I answer this question, Professor Chen?
Okay, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a very good question. Well, I'm only a professor. Okay, I'm not the foreign minister, but I can tell you, definitely, if the so-called Taiwan Policy Act should become the law. Now you are asking if the Congress passes. Well, I believe probably the U.S. Congress will pass it, but the big question is whether President Joe Biden will sign it into law. Okay, I hope Biden will block this act. Biden will not sign it into law. Now, let's say for the worst, okay, if this act will become a law, definitely that will be the end of the US-China relationship. That will be the end of good life for people in Taiwan. Okay, now let me repeat. First, I hope Joe Biden will not sign it into law. Second, if this act becomes law, that will be the end of US-China relationship. Third, that will be the end of good life for the people in Taiwan.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jiang. There is another question. It says, what is China's position regarding the attempt by Western countries to create an environment of discredit and international distrust towards China? So how do you think, what would be China's main strategy to deal with this in the international context?
Well, in my lecture, well, there are three different kind of people. Okay, some people really do not read enough, do not know much about China. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. So we can ask you to read more, and we can do all kinds of things so that you can have more knowledge about China. Secondly, well, some people know something about China, but they look at China with colored glasses. Okay, colored glasses, tinted lens. Okay, well, for these kind of people, we should continue to promote people-to-people exchanges so that you will have a better understanding and you will have less misjudgment about China. Now, the big problem is the last group of people. These people, well, include the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Well, in the eyes of Mike Pompeo, China is an enemy, okay? So that's the kind of people I think China is really, it's really very difficult for China to deal with, because anything you say, they will turn onto a deaf ear, okay? They will never listen to you. They will always see China as an enemy, okay? Well, I'm very sorry to say that even in Europe, there are some kind of people, these kind of people who will always see China as an enemy, okay? So hopefully that through the work or the job of this China-CEE Institute under the leadership of Professor Chen, we will have more better understanding of each other, and we are going to have more mutual trust and a mutual understanding. So this is very important. So I hope that Professor Chen will open more office in Europe. Next time you're going to open an office in London, okay? Because in the UK, well, the UK does not wish to see good relationship with China. So that's a kind of a pity.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiang. And thank you for your good wishes to open more offices. Okay, and I think time is very limited, and we will have the last question. It is on the war of diplomacy. So how's your opinion about what can be done so that this communication gap is more viable and more approachable to the local public policymakers?
Well, I think one of the reasons why people in Europe do not know much about China has something to do with the pandemic. You know, I'm not sure. Well, over the past 2 or 3 years, I've never been set. I have never set foot to any foreign country. I'm not sure if Professor Chen, you have been to any countries in Europe or any part of the world. So the pandemic has limited the people-to-people exchanges, okay? So that's why some people in Europe do not understand what is going on in China, okay? So we are very happy. Well, let me tell you this kind of example. As a Chinese scholar, I'm very happy with this kind of safety under the pandemic, okay? So very, very few people have died from the pandemic, okay? So we are very happy. We are happy with the zero pandemic policy, okay? So this is good. This is good for our life. Life is much, much more important than livelihood, okay? So, but I don't know why people in Europe are, well, pessimistic against China's policy. Why? Because that's a lack of understanding, okay? So that's a lack of mutual trust, lack of people-to-people exchanges. So I hope, as I said just now, after the pandemic, tourism between China and Europe should be given a big impetus so that more Chinese people will go to Europe and more European people will come to China for tourism, and more Chinese scholars will go to Europe for exchanges, and the business people, all kinds of things, okay? So regarding this, I hope that things will change a little bit after the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiang. And there is an ad hoc question, and I think it is very interesting and helpful. So the question is, how could small economies or small countries can better help the peaceful relationship between China and the US in the United Nations or other international organizations, so multilateral platforms.
Well,
how can such kind of small countries take a role?
Yeah. Well, now because of this the so-called geopolitical competition between the major powers like China and the US, well, these small countries tend to suffer. Well, there is a kind of Africa saying, when the two elephants fight, the grass will suffer. Okay, so these small countries will suffer from this kind of two elephants fighting fighting with each other. Now, my view, it goes like this: China will not, and China has never asked any small country to take sides between the US and China. However, the US has tried its means and ways, carrot and a stick, to force the small countries to take sides. Okay, and these small sides, so these small countries can be found in Europe, in Africa, Asia, and also Latin America. So I would say that small countries should not take sides. Well, you are going to pursue the most important national interests on your own, but in the face of globalization, particularly in the age of globalization, small countries should not take sides between US and China. And China has never asked anyone to take sides. However, but the US has tried its best to force the small countries to take sides. So the small countries should resist the American pressure by not taking any sides. That's the only option for the small countries.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiang. I think time is passing so fast, and we are slowly move to the closing of this lecture. And I would like to express my sincere thanks for Professor Jiang's excellent presentation on China's diplomacy policy. And also, I would like to thank the audience for your wonderful questions, and as well as the interactions between the audience and the speaker. So thank you again, and hopefully we will see each other at the next lecture at the China-CEE Institute. So thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Welcome to China.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.